Okay, welcome to the May 7th edition of the Alta Mesa Center for the Arts reading series. We're thrilled today to host Allison Landa, who's the author of Bearded Lady, with author Julia Scheeres, and more on them later, but a little bit about Alta Mesa Center for the Arts. For those of you who don't know, we are an interfaith arts and spirituality hub housed within and sponsored by Orinda Community Church. We believe that art is a spiritual act and a human right. We wish to provide a place where people from diverse traditions, artistic practices, and economic realities come together in community. We know that art can bridge the divisions, substantive and arbitrary, that divide us. We come together not only to practice and to teach the arts, but to celebrate and learn from our differences and to foster lively and respectful interdisciplinary dialogues. We seek unity in diversity. So whoever you are, wherever you are on your artistic and spiritual journey, you are welcome here among us. Like I said, we're very lucky to host Allison Landa and Julia Scheeres, who I think you'll discover are writers who possess both a novelist's ear for language and character, but also the journalist's eye for story. Allison Landa's memoir, Bearded Lady, came out from Woodhill Press in October 2022. She's held residencies at the MacDowell, Playa Summer Lake, Kimmel Harding Nelson Center for the Arts, the Julia and David White Artist Colony, and has been a grant recipient for the Center for Cultural Innovation and the City of Berkeley. She earned an MFA in fiction writing from the St. Mary's College of California and currently writes, teaches, and coaches on a professional basis. She's represented by Marissa Zeppiari of Strachan Literary Agency. And before we let this pass, Allison is a dear friend of mine. We started our writing journeys together at St. Mary's College, and it's just such a thrill to see her voice develop, and her book, which is such a beauty to be featured on Alta Mesa, is a thrill. I'm also thrilled because another favorite writer of mine, Julia Scheeres, is along to help with this presentation. She's the New York Times bestselling author of the memoir Jesus Land. This book is currently on stock at Orinda Books. Both of them are. Also the book 1,000 Lives, A History of the Jonestown Tragedy, and Listen World, a biography of Hearst columnist Elsie Robinson. So please welcome, give a virtual, or go ahead and unmute yourself for a sec and give a rousing welcome to our two writers, and I will turn the mic over to them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mary. That was an amazing introduction. Appreciate it. So yes, Allison and I know each other from the San Francisco Writers Grotto, Writers Collective in San Francisco, where we met a couple years back, and now bond here in the East Bay, where we both live. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to have a conversation for about 35 minutes, broken up with some of Allison reading from her fabulous book. So you guys get a taste for what it's about and her literary flair. Okay. But first off, I feel like I have bonded with Allison because we both grew up as misfits in our own way. I felt like a misfit in my rural Indiana white community because my book, Jesus Land, is a memoir about growing up with an adopted Black brother who was my same age and seeing kind of what that small town hypocrisy and racism was like for him, that experience, right? And Allison, obviously, in Bearded Lady, talks about feeling like a misfit for her own reasons. So let's talk about that. It's kind of cool in the Bay Area to stand out in some way, to not be vanilla, and to have an edge. And I think we both have that now. But, there's a long time in my life, and I think from yours as well, after reading your memoir, where, it was a very kind of a sensitive topic as you're trying to wrap your hands around it. So can you talk a little bit about your journey from feeling like a misfit to owning who you are?
That's a great question, Julia. Like, I really love that. And it's been a long journey and it is an ongoing journey. It's not something that is resolved. It's something that, in my daily life, I feel reminded by just in my own head about things that happened when I was a kid, feeling different, feeling odd, feeling strange, which, as you mentioned, in the Bay Area, it's cool. I mean, that's partly why I love the Bay Area. It's the place where people who are odd come to be odd together. And I feel like it's a beautiful thing. Where I grew up in northern San Diego County, that is a very different thing. And I was I was very obviously different from many people. And in being that, I think that I had to learn, yes, you are different. Yes, it's okay. Yes, you can live and you can thrive. But that took a heck of a long time, especially when you're 16 years old and all you want to do is look like the people around you. All you want to do is be like the people around you. And that journey, the book traces an arc of 20 years from the time I was 10 to the time I was 30. And that throughout that time, I would say that was the most intense part of my process of becoming, for lack of a better phrase, my own self. It meant finding people who were like-minded and learning from people who are not. So I kind of along the way learned how to learn from the people around me, regardless of who they were and how they treated me. And as I said, it's a daily process. It's an ongoing thing, and it always will be. My son has autism and ADHD, and I feel like it's actually an honor to help him work through it, because I remember what that was like, what it was to be different. So it
Right.
feels kind of good.
You're in a good place to help him as well, right? I feel like we should back up and explain the title for those of you who aren't familiar with Allison Landa's memoir. It's called Bearded Lady. And what does that refer to specifically? Does anybody understand what that is on the cover? Let's take a poll. What does it look like? Cynthia's got her hand up. Oh, you're muted,
well,
Cynthia.
It's not fair because I actually know what it is.
Okay. What is it?
Well, yeah, it's the wax that Allison used as a depilatory agent.
There we go.
But it looks like peanut butter.
No, it looks like coffee. Looks like
coffee.
cappuccino.
Okay.
I've had so many people say that. Hot wax? But it sure does look like something edible. That is very true. When I was 10, I started to develop facial hair. I started to develop facial hair. And I just remember randomly running my hand along my chin and thinking, that is not what I should be feeling right now. And it came to the point where I was literally shaving like a man twice a day to sort of beat back the flames, as it were. And when I was after I graduated from St. Mary's, I had cosmetic procedure. I had laser hair removal, and it obviously took care of the problem, but my goodness, it was a long process along the way to sort of work with it and come to terms with it.
Right. And even though it's cosmetically gone, that experience of growing up different obviously settles inside of you and is what you are writing about in this book.
Absolutely.
So talk about, what the effect of what do you want the effect of this book to be on readers? What do you hope the general public gains from reading your book?
I would love for people to ponder what makes them weird in the world, because I think that if you look around any room that you happen to be in, you will find, I'm the exception at the moment because the only other being in the room where I'm in is my dog, and she doesn't think she's weird at all. So let's leave her out of the equation. But usually, I'll be sitting in a cafe and I'll be looking around and I'll be thinking, everybody here has something that makes them feel bizarre. Everyone here has something that makes them feel different. Everyone here has something that makes them feel like they don't fit in. And I would love for this book to encourage people to ponder that, to ponder how we treat each other. And that's not to say you have to treat everyone all the time with respect. Yes, you should. But that's more, the message is more, just think about it. Just think about the fact that what makes us weird also unites us. And if people take that away, then I'm very fulfilled.
It's great. Did you want to read a portion of the book to give people a taste for Bearded
I
Lady?
would love to. Yes, I would love to. I have it bookmarked here. Before this book was published, I thought it'll be so exciting to have the book with all the little different, bookmarks and everything. And it's exciting to have that. And exciting to read to you. So what I'm going to read to you is from 1993. Carol and I are shopping at the Isla Vista Food Co-op. It's a little more than 2 blocks from campus, but 2 blocks are another world when you're talking about the difference between campus and IV. Campus is manicured lawns and commemorative plaques, landscaped pathways, and well-maintained buildings. IV defies description. If a garbage dump featured cafes, burrito shops, and a place called Dog Shit Park, it would be the college town in which I live. This place is dusty, I muttered to her as we walk in. I feel like I need a mask or something. You looked at your bedroom lately, she says. I moved here after the end of the school year. Carol, Sandy, and I found a place on Camino Pescadero. Translation, Fishmonger Street. It's between Picasso and Abrego roads, a painter and a southwest wind. I sometimes wonder who named those streets, who, if anyone, designed this place of pizza and the occasional peace march. It feels random and reckless, as if whomever named it was as drunk as the residents. We live in apartment 0, 5 blocks from the beach. That might as well be another country so far as this college surf town is concerned. I'm okay with that. Isla Vista may not be for the weak of stomach muscles or for those who lack a decent tan, but I don't feel as out of place as I might have expected. This little enclave is 80% clones, and that makes for a 20% freak show. There's room for me. See, a freak finds its way. On the face of it, there's not much choice. Figure out how to walk in the open or spend your days in the bell tower. Modern-day bell towers are no place to spend your time. There's no pizza delivery, no satellite TV. What the hell is an oatmeal wheat-free snack meal, I ask. $1 worth of love, she says, that's what. So the freak climbs down into the world. The world, that warren of rocky pathways. The freak learns to navigate, bumping against dead ends, tripping on fallen branches. There's the occasional twinge of the funny bone, the high, sweet sting, a flashing warning, a lesson. Today's lesson, organic Cheerios cost $5. Why am I doing this? Because I want to lose weight, that's why. I want to be healthier. Left to my own devices, I wouldn't go to this co-op. I would take the bus to Lucky, a place of everyday low prices and familiar goods. They don't have the kind of cereal and bread that I like here. They don't sell Ruffles. Good thing, though, since I'm not supposed to be eating that stuff anyway. These coffee filters are called If You Care, I say. What if I don't care? Then you get the ones that ruin the environment and shut up while you're at it. We're in the bulk foods aisle when the blonde approaches. She's maybe 35, with wavy hair that brushes her shoulders and a warm, inviting smile. I would trust that smile. I could fall into it. She wears a tailored jacket and matching slacks. Other than Ronald Reagan, I couldn't think of a more ill-fitting customer for this place. This woman looks like she should be shopping downtown at Lazy Acres, browsing for free-range poultry on her way to the cappuccino bar. She walks up to me as if we've known each other from somewhere in a past life. She was Lady Godiva, and I the horse. She walks up to me as if she had the right. Her mouth never opens. She doesn't speak a word. She retrieves a silver holder from her jacket pocket. She handles it with long polished nails, a subdued version of my mother's talons. She flips the holder open and retrieves a small square card. My reach is a reflex. The card feels stiff and substantial between my fingers, a tactile testament to her professional expertise. In an instant, her smile disassembles and walks out the door. Part by part, the rest of her follows. All that remains is a shampoo scent, something the marketing people might call fresh white rain. I look down. I see one word, electrologist. I heat up from the inside out. I turn to steam. I could vaporize. Carol takes the card. She pulls it from my grasp. She rarely smiles, and when she does, it feels as if it is for you and you alone. She is not smiling now. She runs her card along the raised lettering, then folds it in half, creasing it. She reminds me of Missy in this moment, forceful and protective. The market smells like a mixture of incense and plastic, a blend of the phony and the overly familiar. I watch her ragged nails with their torn cuticles as she rips the card along its crease. She tears it in half and then in fourths and throws away the remnants.
Wow. That's really good. That's really good.
Thank you.
Powerful. That's what I love about your memoir. There's like these small, fully charged moments that you set up so well, the emotion, and then you slow it way down and let the drama and the tension play out. You are masterful at that. So that's really cool. So, both of us wrote very personal stories. When I know for me to write Jesus Land, it felt like something I needed to get out of my system before I could settle down and have kids, because I had so much anger about my upbringing and, watching my brother undergo this incredible experience with being rejected in our small town and racism and violence at home. And I felt like there came a point in my life where I just needed to get this off of my chest. I needed to pull all of that mess out of me and move on, to move on. It was really freeing when I did it. I quit my job. I broke up with a fiance. I moved into the small apartment in Oakland and just pounded out the book, right? And it was a very cleansing experience. I know you're not supposed to say that writing a memoir is cathartic, but it was. So how did it feel for you? I mean, for me, it was like writing the painful parts were excruciating. I had to force myself to stay in front of the computer screen and just finish the scene and then go reward myself with a walk or buy myself a plant or have a drink or something. But what was your experience like writing about those difficult things?
I feel like you just nailed it. You need to pull that out of yourself. It's something that will bring you down. It'll hold you down. It's almost like a magnet that brings you to the wrong people and the wrong situations. It's just something you need to work with and eventually dispense of. And the way that I did it was, when I was at first at St. Mary's, actually. I remember we were supposed to write a story, which my professor Wesley Gibson said, well, that's a very unusual thing in the MFA program to actually write. And I just remember thinking that was funny. But I remember coming to him and just saying, this is what I want to write about. And I was humiliated. I was just like, I don't know what the hell to say. And all he said is, sweetheart, go for it. And that really, it urged me to purge, if you'll forgive the internal rhyme. It really urged me to get in there and work with what I had going on. I had been in therapy before. I had, I'd worked through it, but I'd never talked to anybody about it. I mean, at the time, my husband was my boyfriend, and I hadn't talked to him about it. I hadn't talked to anybody. It scared the hell out of me to address what was obvious and what may not have been so obvious. Then later I went to a workshop at Joyce Maynard's house, and what she said was, she said when she wrote At Home in the World about J.D. Salinger, that she got out what she needed to get out, and then she wrote 2 books in quick succession after that. And I was like, wow, that's pretty damn good. I mean, can't say I've written 2 books in quick succession, but I'm not Joyce. But what it really made me realize is that I could do that. I could work with what happened to me. I could work with what I'd experienced. And I didn't have to, and maybe you experience this as well. You realize you don't have to live with it. You realize that you can work with what you've experienced and move on. And that's what I chose to do. I chose to move on. And again, ongoing process. Therapy bills are still rolling in, but it's much better.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I know both of us kind of reveal some family secrets and dysfunction in our memoirs. And I know from having written a memoir and from teaching memoir and working with people writing memoirs that if you write a memoir and it has anything about your family, it's like you're setting yourself up as the family historian, and that pisses people off. It's like, why, right? Who are you to speak for us, the family unit, right? But that's perilous because everybody in the family unit has their own way of viewing this collective experience, right? Depending on what your mindset is, on what your personal private experience was. And I know for me, I tried to minimize my family members as much as possible, except for my parents, because, they should have known better. They should have done better as parents. And ultimately, when Jesus Land was published and it became a bestseller, they wrote me out of their will, and I haven't spoken to them since 2005. What has your experience been like with your family? Did you let them read portions of the book? Did you go over like the factual point by point, this is what I'm writing about? What was your approach to this question?
I drank a lot. Now, my approach to it was, I was really nervous. And as it turned out, and I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, I shouldn't have been nervous. Neither of my parents has read it.
They haven't read it.
They have
now?
Not read it. I believe
Why?
They are scared to read it. I should back up and say my mother has read a snippet that was published before the book was published. I put it on Facebook, totally forgetting that she and I were friends. And my phone rang. I was sitting in a cafe and my phone rang, and I took it outside and I picked it up, and she was crying, and she said, "It's beautiful." And I was like, holy shit, I totally forgot that you could read it. So she was really into it. But right now she's having some health issues, and I think that that's kind of taken over for her. And in terms of my dad, it would be easy to say my dad is not a reader and leave it at that. But my father really ducks and dives away from the truth that he doesn't choose to create, if that makes any sense. And he has never asked to read it. He has never shown interest, which is kind of amazing to me. It's like, well, geez, are you interested in reading it? But it also kind of is a relief, to be honest. Mm-hmm. It's like, it sort of takes that pressure off. My brother, I have two brothers. The older one has read it. The younger one has very deliberately not. He's very deliberately basically said, I am not going to read this. I am a little intimidated and I don't want to read it. And I have to respect that decision. As much as I don't like it, I have to respect it. It's like, you have your own feelings about our family, and you're entitled to those feelings. And I will support that, even as it's a little painful. My other brother, who is very unlike me, he's kind of like a beach boy, read it on the beach in Cabo, which makes me laugh. Because it's not it may be pink, but this is not a beach read. So he read it lying on the beach in Cabo, and he liked it. He was into it. He said, this really reflects what I believe to be true about our family. And I was like, wow, that's more than you've said to me in years. So It was really, it's surprising. I talk to a lot of people about how do I deal with my family once the book comes out, and it's like everybody's gonna have a different experience.
It's interesting. I know Anne Lamott once said that if people didn't want to be written about, they should behave better.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Which I love.
Agreed.
Especially parents, and I'm a parent now, so I'm very, 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 very careful because I don't want anybody writing memoirs about me, God forbid.
I hear you.
But at least their parents haven't read it, and my parents haven't read it at all. They're just assuming the worst. But
So
my
they never read
siblings,
it.
no, they refused. My parents are, the Christian right personified. So we have nothing in common anymore. There's no hope for that. But my sisters read it and are very supportive, even though they are devout Christians. I am no longer a Christian after this experience that I went through in Jesus Land. And we're very supportive. So I think it's great. I think, if your siblings support you, that's wonderful. Right.
I really appreciate that my brother did. It means a lot to me. It's almost kind of perfect how he read it, lying on the beach. I thought that was perfect.
Now, has there been any blowback from writing this book at all?
Surprisingly, no. And that really shocked me, because you'd think that people might have something to say that isn't, I'm not going to say like everything that's been said to me is positive, but I think the great majority, probably 99% of it has been, which tells me that there are people who are not saying things that perhaps they feel, because a book like mine is not a book everyone's going to like or appreciate or feel akin to. And yet I have not received blowback. I have not received what I expected emails from people saying, how dare you? How dare you sell out your family? How dare you, how dare you?
Wow. Well, it's a beautiful book. It's so fast paced, which I love, because I read plenty of like very slow, windy memoirs, and yours achieves that right balance of being fast paced and profound at the same time. Like, I feel like there's not a wasted word in the memoir. So.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. Like, thank you so much. That's awesome.
Well, why don't you read us another section?
I sure
think we
will.
have time, right?
Yeah. What time is it now? I think we have time. 4:31. Let me go ahead and read. Just to set this up, this is when I was in college. Dr. Peter Anderson isn't hot. That surprises me. I'd expected him to be built like Cosmopolitan's interpretation of a Greek god, swarthy and muscular. He's cute. Thin gold-rimmed glasses, a dimple in his chin, a likable demeanor. It doesn't put me at ease, but then again, I'm not sure anything would. You were diagnosed as hirsute, he says, but never treated. Yes, I say. I want to have some explanation. My parents perished in a tragic plane crash on their way home from consulting with the Mayo Clinic. They died trying to make me hair-free, but there is none. Okay, he says. Let's see what we can do. He hands me a cotton hospital gown. I glance at it and notice there's a pattern, roses. On closer inspection, it makes no sense. The roses are brown. Is there even such a thing as a brown rose? Have I entered the David Lynch Medical Clinic? I stand with the soft bundle in my hands. I'm going to have to undress. I'm going to have to strip down to my underwear, a bra and panties that don't even match, and cover myself with this thin piece of cloth. Take your time, he says. Then I'm alone. This room is so white. Color exists only in small pockets, a pink tissue box, turquoise chairs, black and beige linoleum tiles on the floor, reminiscent of the See's candy floors that I skipped across as a kid. Don't step on the black, bad luck. Step only on the white squares. I was a child the last time I showed my body to another human being. In school locker rooms, I found abandoned corners where I could sponge bathe after gym class, then change clothes away from the eyes of others. In the communal bathrooms of my dorm, I dressed in shower stalls. Then there were sexual experiences, the few that I'd had. I covered myself as much as possible, but even that wasn't enough. I talk myself through the process. Start at the top, I say, and pull my hooded sweatshirt over my head. Now the shorts, I say. I unsnap and unzip and push the denim down over my hips. I kick the sneakers from my feet, but leave the white socks. Protection. I fold everything military style. I stack the shirt atop the shorts. I place both on a chair. I align my shoes perfectly and place them against the wall. Then I reach for the gown. So much white in here, so much negative space. We use negative space when we lay out the college newspaper. Emptiness as a positive element. It works well on the editorial pages. Here, it just feels like the tundra. I pull the gown over my arms. The cotton is soft against my skin. I think about the others who have worn this gown. Were they shaking too? Did sweat lie clammy on the backs of their knees? There are 2 sets of ties, one at the neck, the other at the waist. I pull them as tight as possible. It doesn't work. My back and ass are on display. A knock. I'm ready, I say. He starts at the top and works his way down. He looks everywhere. Being seen is like getting a massage from a blowtorch. Being touched is worse. When did your hairline start receding? When did I become Rooster? That's my father. Will my comb over flap from side to side as I stroll Butterfly Beach? Will I start bringing coupons to every restaurant meal, and when they're caught out as expired, fish a backup out of my wallet? Have you tried any other method of hair removal, or just shaving? I once tried waxing. When I pulled off the sticky strip, it turned my chin red and took not one hair with it. I considered using Nair. I pulled the pink bottle from the drugstore shelf and thought about the spoof ad that I'd seen. 2 monkeys, one with a baby smooth ass. The ad trumpeted, so easy, anyone could use it. I wasn't just anyone. I knew I had problems beyond those of your ordinary simian. I replaced the bottle and walked out the automatic door. How about your periods, he asks now. Regular? Strangely, they've reappeared. I took up jogging 2 months ago and am now buying sanitary napkins for the first time in years. Are you sexually active? I suppose what I did with Brent was sex, even if it wasn't going all the way, even if in the end it felt less like intimacy and more like intrusion. I will never see him again. I would rather spend the rest of my life alone, nose pressed to the window, looking in at life, than be with him. He's examining every inch of my body. There is nowhere to hide. He palpates my belly. The muscles in my arms tighten. My fingernails bite into my palms. Try to relax, he says. Sure.
Wow. Thank you.
Thanks.
I still remember the smell of Nair.
It's so gross.
Gross. So gross. Anyway, it's beautiful. Everybody go run and buy this book at your nearest indie bookstore online or in person. Orinda Books, I guess, is carrying it, right, Mary?
Yes.
Yeah, Orinda Books has plenty of copies, and I've just put in the link above, and I'll repost it as well, bookshop.org. If you must, go ahead and go to Amazon. But if you go to Amazon, or even if you buy the book elsewhere, review it on Amazon, because the more times we can get voices and eyes on this book, the more people will buy it. And I think it's an important read. Both of these books, Jesus Land and Bearded Lady, are vital, I think, to the stories that tell us about how to be better humans, or more human in the first place. One thing that strikes me is how much humor plays into your story, Allison, and knowing, I know you're wicked funny, but there's also kind of a utility of humor to deliver some of the more painful moments of the book with a grace that otherwise might be hard for a reader to accept and to take on board. So can you talk, both of you, perhaps, about the use of humor within the narratives to I don't know, soften, but maybe just invite the reader into the story in a way they may not otherwise be able to enter?
Well, thank you. First of all, that's a huge compliment. Humor is a very big deal for me. It's something that I feel makes a story accessible in a very unique way. Humor is smart. Humor touches people in ways that maybe other craft elements might not. And this is a weird story, and it's my story, and I'll still say, till I'm done breathing, that it is a weird story. And so in order to build that bridge with the reader, I wanted it to be accessible. I wanted it to be, dare I say, likable. And I feel that humor lowers the resistance that a reader will sometimes bring to the page. I know I do. I bring resistance to the page all the time. And I feel that humor sort of defrays that to some degree. And it makes it a lot more universal in a way that just describing what happened to me might not. So it was very strategic. And frankly, it just makes the writing more fun. Sometimes when it was really, really fucking hard to write, I would throw in something that I knew, to me at least, was funny. And it seemed to have worked.
It reminds me of David Sedaris in a way. You know, these do have a very similar way of bringing out the detail that I didn't expect, but it's perfect. It's making me laugh, and at the same time, it's making me cry. It was just so I don't know if you have more books in there. I'm really looking forward to seeing what's next. I have one more question before we open it up, and that's about your relationship to your mothers, but also now your relationship to your children as mothers, and how maybe the writing of these books have informed the way you approach this impossible task of raising little people into the world.
Wow.
What's the question? Sorry.
Yeah,
or was it an observation?
yeah. Well, how has examining this experience of your youth prepared you in some ways to become mothers, or has it complicated the task?
I'll go.
Please.
Sure. Well, it's funny because I have 2 teenage daughters now, and I'm writing about being a teenager. So the scope of my book is from age 15 to roughly age 17, 18. And I did not have a good relationship with my parents. In fact, they sent me to a reform school when I was 17 years old, this Christian reform school in the Dominican Republic that was incredibly brutal. And basically just stepped away from parenting and let other people raise my brother and I during those years because he was there as well. So I, now with my teenage daughters, one of them gives me a bigger run for my money than the other, but I'm always thinking like, okay, I know this is a temporary phase. I know this friction and the butting of heads, especially between mothers and daughters, can be really, really difficult. But I don't want to be the mother who just abdicated her duties and stepped away, even emotionally. I have walked away many times and have had to bite my tongue, but I think that's also from writing a memoir because I don't want to give her any material to write about or go to therapy about, so a lot of times I just find it's just better just to zip it and walk away. And thank God for cell phones. I can just text her when I am feeling like I needed some space. Sometimes we just communicate by text, and that's the best way to communicate. So how's it been for you, Allison?
Well, first I just want to say, like, the idea of communicating by text is so brilliant. Sometimes words alone, unadorned, can really do something that talking can't. And I wish that my son is only 7, and so he doesn't really have that down yet, but I just think that's brilliant. For me, my relationship with my mother has always been very fraught. My mother is a very unique and difficult individual. And yet the last time I saw her, she said, "I'm glad to see you." And that just blew my mind. I was like, wow, I'm happy to see you. It makes me happy to see you. So I feel like, okay, something along the way has changed. Maybe she, while she can't bring herself to read the book, respects the fact that I've produced it. And that alone, I can hang with that. It's not perfect. It's, I don't mean to be glib about it by any stretch. I would love to have had a mother who read it and wanted to engage with it, but that's not my mom. And I in terms of caring about her, I do love her because she is my mother, but man, she's challenging, and it's always going to be that way. And in terms of my son, Buzz is 7 and he is autistic and has ADHD, and I don't want that. I want that to be something he works with, not something that defines him per se. And I feel that that's actually working out. I mean, he is his own little dude, and there's no way around that. He's his own guy, and anybody who meets him knows it. And I don't know that anybody who meets him, the first thing they say is, "Oh, this kid is, whatever." I mean, he's just Buzz. And I, like you, Julia, I worry about, well, what material am I going to give him for therapy later down the road? What material am I giving him for the memoir that he may write about me? Lately, he's been in a very fuck you mom mood. So I'm like, oh God, like he's been calling me a moron and things like that. It's like, oh God,
No.
Yeah, he's learned the word moron and he uses it quite frequently. But I think what I've learned to do is help protect his experience as his own person, rather than saying, this is who and what I want you to be. This is who and what I need you to be. It's not about me. And he was never, I can't conflate him with me. Even when he was in my own body, he was his own being. And so the best thing I can do for him, in my opinion, is to help him become his best self. And in so doing, I think that I've had a lot of sleepless nights and I'm tired as hell. But any caretaker will agree with that, I think. But it's kind of amazing. I mean, I didn't plan to have him, but he is so wonderful. And Julia, you mentioned the idea of cathartic. It's been very cathartic to have him. It's a wonderful experience.
Yeah, that's great.
That was beautiful. Both of you, thank you for those responses. Let's open it up. I know there must be questions in the audience, and you can either raise your hand or unmute yourself, or you can put something in the chat and we'll get it that way. Cynthia. Yeah, there you are.
Can you hear me?
You're good. Yep.
I can hear you.
Okay. I have a comment and a question that probably doesn't shock you. First comment was, Mary, you give David Sedaris as an example of someone who uses humor in the course of making serious or profound or sad points. And I think Allison does that beautifully. The author that I thought of, coming from the culture that I do and that Allison comes from with me, is Philip Roth, who used a great amount of humor. And my lovely wife here was reading his book, Portnoy's Complaint, when she was recovering from some surgery and some pregnancy loss. And she was alternately crying and laughing, literally, in the waiting room, reading that book. So that's powerful stuff that I think your book is capable of too, Allison.
Wow. That's such a great comparison, and I'm so honored. That's lovely.
I told you that when I read your book, it jumped out at me that the Philip Roth part that I've read described, and the other part was, and maybe this is a little overblown, but the staccato, short sentences, direct words reminded me of Hemingway. And a combination of Hemingway and Philip Roth, you could do worse.
I agree. My head will not allow me to fit through the door. So thank you.
My question in your Amazon review, please.
my question. I'm too low tech to do online reviews, but
you can dictate it to me.
There you go.
There you go.
This is the usual teamwork. You mentioned you were in therapy. I know you've been in therapy, and you are in therapy. Were you in therapy while you were writing Bearded Lady? And if so, how, if at all, do you think it affected your writing, thinking, and communication?
Oh, awesome question. And I was off and on, absolutely. I feel like it allowed me to process in ways that I probably couldn't have done on my own. And yet there were times that I said to myself, I can't have therapy right now. I can't. Writing this book is enough. I cannot be in therapy right now. There's only so much I can write, think, act upon this. there were times I felt like my head was full of it. And, obviously there are other things to talk about in therapy, but this is something I did process quite a bit in therapy. And what therapy allowed me to do, and I don't know about anybody else's experience, would love to hear about it. It allowed me to step outside my own experience. It allowed me to have perspective in ways that I could not have before. And I read initial drafts of this book and I cringe. It's like, oh my God, I did not write that, did I? It's kind of like reading your journal from the time you were 15 years old. Like, oh, this is mortifying. It's just like, did I actually write this? Give me a freaking break. And what therapy did is allowed me to, like I said, step outside of that and see what my role was in everything. And I had a role. Everybody has their own role. I'm no different. I had a role. And that was something that really came clear in therapy. So the many hundreds of dollars that I spent on the process, I think, they were well spent.
Are you sharing royalties with your therapist?
Oh, hell no. It's actually funny that you asked that. I was getting my first royalty check in a couple of weeks. Oh, no, I know. I'm getting my first royalty check in a couple of weeks, and I'm like, whoa, wow. I actually get paid for this. This is amazing.
I feel your pain.
Congratulations. That's a big step to get your first royalty. You've earned out. Good job.
Yeah. It's exciting. Well, I better have earned out because I didn't get an advance. So got
okay.
zero.
Well, it's all gravy then. That's good.
It's all gravy. That's exciting. It's like, well, okay, I've earned it out because I didn't get anything. But I'm excited I written to them and said, when can I expect it? And they said, well, you must be a spirit in the room because we just issued the check. So it's coming. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Bev.
I'm not sure. Well, anyhow, it's something about, I put in the chat that I appreciate even as you present yourself, from the first words you spoke to us, you're just like, here I am, like not apologetic, if that word fits. I guess I picked that up from Amy Poehler, has a quotation about how she spent years learning to stop apologizing for herself. And that's been part of my legacy from my culture and era of apologizing for myself. I thought, gee, if I've asked myself, if I were ever to get a tattoo, what would it be? And first I thought, well, it should be, I'm sorry. But then I thought, well, no, it should be, I'm not sorry. So I guess it's not really a question unless you wish to comment on just kind of coming to this gathering and to coming to life and in a healed, whole self way of being unapologetic and also I struggle. The word lady, I've spent years hating the word lady, how it was used in a negative way during my life, and I refuse to use it. And I understand that it comes from the culture, that other culture. And so I guess I wonder about your choice of title with the word lady.
Well, it's funny. Well, first of all, thank you so much for what you said. It's taken a long time to become me. I believe that it was Miles Davis who says you have to play a lot of notes to sound like yourself. And I've played a lot of notes, and I've sounded awful at times and sounded better at other times. And I hope that I sound like myself now, whatever that sounds like. Bearded Lady was something that just came to me, and it was sort of a stand-in title for a long time before it was like, well, until I find a better title. But there was something about the title that I liked because it was arresting. It's like, oh, it sort of was, so to speak, in your face. And I liked that. Surprisingly, it's funny that the idea of blowback, I have heard through the grapevine that there are people who've had issues with the title Bearded Lady, particularly people who are associated with the congenital adrenal hyperplasia community. And that's what I have. I have congenital adrenal hyperplasia. And I've heard that people have said, that's sort of reductive. And it's like, well, but that's how I saw myself. I saw myself as a bearded lady. And that's what I carried with me. And eventually I decided that was the title.
I think it's a great title. I mean, it's catchy. It's, everybody, you think it's one of those that makes you think, like, what is this referring to? Right? It's a caricature of like the circus performer. Yeah. It's like, what is going on in this memoir? I need to know more. So I think it's a brilliant title.
And it's memorable too. It's very memorable. It's easy to remember.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And it's unapologetic. And as an older parent, I guess I want to get up on my grandmother's platform, high horse here, and say, oh, don't worry about it. Just be yourself and don't overthink what your offspring will say or write or do, or how often they'll come to you with resentments or not.
There's always going to be something.
Just be.
I think there's always going to be something, but I like the idea of just a way to remember for me to behave better. I'm into grandparenting too, and some of them are in their 40s, and now they're young parents, and they're going back like they think they're so perfect now as parents, and all the things that we did wrong have been coming up. Not all, but anyway.
Both of these books too. And the conversation reminds me that we're never quite growing up. We're not done growing up.
No.
You can grow old. You don't have to just get old. There is a process by which you continue to expand your mind and your awareness and your understanding. And I'm just grateful to both of you and to the audience here today to have helped all of us do that. We have more time for questions, but before time expires, I want to draw your attention to our next reading, which is on June 11th, and it features Lucy Jane Bledsoe, who don't know, some of you might have remembered Lucy came out with a book last year, and she's out with another book this year, which is Too Irresistible to Pass Up. We're featuring it in June, which is Pride Month, and it's about a conversion camp in Oregon and two characters who return to Oregon in their adult life to kind of have to confront this traumatic experience, but also confront who they are now. And again, I think both of this series, maybe unintentionally, this is a theme of the summertime of how do you become? How do you allow yourself to become? And I think Allison's book and Julia's book both touch on that in profound and meaningful ways. But I want to thank both of them. I want to thank Allison. I want to thank Julia. If you want to unmute and clap, or if you want to virtually clap, that's just fine. We'll stick around for a few more minutes, so you don't have to rush away if you want to ask questions and do those kinds of things. But thank you.
I have a comment and a question again. The comment is, I'm shocked that each of you would have first of all, that you would think, what will my children write about me 20 years from now? Have the discipline to then change your behavior backed on that, based on that, is shocking to me. It's one in 1,000 people might become a writer. And why should it be your kids? And who's going to remember what happened? I know your own experience may form that for you, but I found it really striking that you would each have that thought in your head. That's my comment. You could react to it if you want. And then my question was, Julia said something quickly in passing that struck me as different or interesting or perplexing, which is, you said, Julia, and you teach memoir. Well, we're not supposed to say that writing a memoir is cathartic. Why not? Why aren't we supposed to say that?
Why not?
Oh, well, thank you for bringing up that question, because for a long time, memoir has kind of been seen as like the ugly stepsister of literature. Like, memoir isn't a legit form of narrative, say like a novel or something. I don't know if you've run into that attitude, Allison, but I have many times. Remember the first time I went to, I don't know what it's called now, but back when I went there, it was called the Squaw Valley Community of Writers. I think it's just called the Community of Writers now. I remember one guy meeting a guy, and he's like, "Oh, you're writing a memoir," and I was like, "What?" Like, it was a French accent, the snooty French accent, right? I think people think it's navel gazing, really. That it's not a literary form. Like, what do you have to say about your life that any of us could care about? And I actually got that questioning from my own siblings. Like, who wants to read about you and David? You know, me and my brother. Who cares?
Right.
Apparently they did. It became a New York Times bestseller. But I mean, I feel like that's something memoirists constantly have to push back on. It's like, why should we care about your life and what you have to say? What a good memoir does, like Allison's, it illuminates a larger topic. In this case, it illuminates what it's like to be a misfit in a perfect place, like Santa Barbara, California, right? All of those beautiful people. What is it like to be the odd woman out? You know, for me, what was it like to grow up in the weird family with the 2 adopted Black sons? You know, and how did that play out? How were we ostracized? So it's, for me, if a memoir is done well, it will comment on a larger social phenomenon, but through this very private lens, which makes it very compelling and interesting. It's like you're getting a window into someone's life, right? And that can be riveting, like those very personal, private details.
Because we don't usually share as much. But I was just I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can't wait to read both of those. But I think you said you didn't get much blowback, but I think so much was because of the artistry, which I'm guessing you both have. But like you said, the humor in your artistry just takes it to a whole different level. And I just want to compliment you on that again.
Yeah, it's true.
The word choices and the juxtapositions and just the fun of it all, the humor, just your writing ability. Anyway.
I appreciate that very complete and understandable answer, Julia. And it really highlights how you and Allison have both in your books been able to, it's not just your catharsis, it relates to larger issues about bullying or growing up different or hypocrisy and racism. That's all in those books, and that's also what those books are about.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Humanity.
Go for it, Allison.
Oh, I was just going to say very much so. I mean, I think that honestly, without the higher themes, this would just be a story. It would be an anecdote. It might be an anecdote that had some weight to it, but it would just be an anecdote. And I wanted it to be more than that. I wanted it to be something that everybody who read it could connect with, not just say, "Oh, poor thing," but to kind of almost put them on the emotional spot and say, "Well, what about you?" And I hope that comes through.
It's beautiful.
And
thank you.
I think a lot of teenagers all feel like they're different too. I think the majority of teenagers feel like they're not the same as everybody else, even if they. I was 6'1" and at age 13 or 14. No, I'm sorry. I was 6 feet, and the only one that had brown hair and brown eyes in the old days, way old days. So I completely relate to it. I think it's lovely. My husband used to tease me and say, "How's the tall freak doing?" Just
is your husband taller than you are?
Barely equal. We're both shorter now, but he would do it just to joke me out of myself, because I was thinking that, and by saying it, it got it out. It's like calling yourself the bearded lady. How's the tall freak doing? And then about
Sounds
20
like you
years
handled
ago,
it pretty well.
Yeah, so about 20 years ago, everywhere I hear all these tall girls like Mary strutting around because they're athletes and they're tall. So that's another sideline. You never know how things are going to change.
Yeah,
very true.
I think it's actually a plus to be tall these days. I mean, I don't know. It's still not easy, but you never know what's going to happen.
So true.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. We might leave the last word for Baudelaire because he's because he says something I think it is true, and he says, how do I make you see that when I speak to you about myself, it is about you I am speaking? And that seems, I felt that you were speaking to me, both of you, and I appreciated it very much. I needed to hear what you had to say.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Thank you all. And Mary,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah,
Thank you for organizing.